Barbers of Reddit, what was your oh crap moment? My coworker at a salon was cutting a girl's hair and found lice. The girl's mom had left her for the trim and she had to wait for her mom in the lobby. We spent the next hour or so frantically cleaning around all of the other clients and stylists to sanitize the whole place top to bottom. When the mom came back and asked her why she didn't have her hair cut, she replied they found out. Who brings their lice-ridden child to the salon? When my mom worked at Perfect Look, she says the lice was pretty much constant. So many lice kids. But she was told she wasn't legally allowed to say your kid has lice, since that's technically a diagnosis. She was supposed to say something like we've found something that appears like it may be lice or something like that. Lots of the parents super did not care. Yeah, we had so many cases come through. Most didn't realize. I just couldn't believe that they came knowing that she had lice and tried to sneak it in. We were lucky enough to be able to tell them that they had lice though. One lady brought her kid to the doctor and the doctor said it wasn't lice. Like, ma'am, we see way more lice than the doctor does. Those are eggs, those are nits. Look at this photo on Google, it's the exact same. She walked away not believing us and mad that we wouldn't give her kid the $11 haircut. Not seeing a lot of actual barbers in this thread because probably a lot of these sort of stories will make you look like a bad barber, but oh well. Here's a collection of my oh crap stories from my 8 years in the industry. Beauty school. This tweaker dude and his hippie girlfriend come in for $7 haircuts. Immediately, something seemed off about the girlfriend. She seemed a little not all there and was cross-eyed and had dreads poking out of her hippie hat. The appointments were a bit staggered, so I finished the guy's one all over buzzcut and my classmate calls me over to help with hers. When she took off the girl's hat, her hair was completely matted and filthy, and beneath the matted hair were stinking, suppurating sores covering her scalp. When we combed at the hair, her scalp would begin to give and split away wetly. We called over an instructor who tried to explain that we couldn't service someone who was literally oozing. She didn't seem to understand, and they left without paying. I'll never forget that smell. Also beauty school, when bang trims go poorly. If you cut even slightly too high and a cowlick in the front goes bowing and springs the hair right up off the face, there's literally no coming back from a bad bang trim. To be fair, if it was that important, she shouldn't have been having students doing it. This also applies to colors. Local teenage girls would come in expecting a full head of highlights and then be shocked and angry when it goes poorly and takes forever and there's huge lines near the root. Arguments between 17-year-old clients and 19-year-old jailbird beauty school girls were really common. Lice. I've had 3 run-ins with lice on kids in my 8 years of cutting hair. You just have to stop cutting immediately, discreetly send them back to their parents, and spend the next hour cleaning and feeling crawly. Discovering something like lice is like the classic oh crap moment in haircutting. Years ago, I was working at a shop in SF's Tenderloin. I was standing near the window looking absent-mindedly outside. This drugged out woman on the corner decides that I was looking at her, so she shambles into the shop right up to the station and starts threatening me, inches from my face. I become acutely aware that my razors and shears are sitting in plain view on the counter next to us, and that I have to get them into my possession and away from her before she can use them against me. I decided that if I'd have to stab a crackhead in self-defense, I'd use my trusty 8 inches. Before it gets to that, my coworkers intervene and begin corralling her outside. At the doorway she starts swinging, punches one coworker in the face and bites the other on the chest. Cops showed up pretty quick and arrested her about a block away. I spent another year at that shop constantly looking over my shoulder, certain that she'd one day reappear. Once had a dude pass out after a haircut. Based on what he told me, he had some sort of sensory issues, and the combination of heat, the neck strip, clipper buzzing and noise of the shop overwhelmed him. If you've ever dealt with a person fainting, you know what an oh crap moment it is. 1 minute dude is standing up and looking a little worried. Next he is crumpling to the floor. I'm a little guy, but I was able to sort of catch him and ease him down without anyone getting hurt. It was pretty scary. My first thought was that I somehow killed him. And my personal worst story, I was cutting one of my regular's hair, and he always insisted on scissor over comb instead of clippers on the side, which is fine and kind of my thing anyhow. I was working in the lower right corner of his nape, moving upwards with my biggest 8-inch dry cutting scissors, and he sorta twisted toward me to say something at the precise moment my shears closed, causing me to close a pivot of my shears right onto the flesh atop of his ear. It wasn't like a little common nick. I felt my tools puncture living flesh. The whole top chunk was like hanging off and bleeding profusely. My coworker said I looked pale and panicked, and I still don't know how I did it, but I managed to get the ear chunk back in place with surgical glue and staunch the bleeding with talcum powder. The craziest part is he kept coming to see me, insisted on paying full price plus tip, and continued coming back up until he moved away a year later. About 5 years later, not a day goes by at work where I don't think about the sickening sensation of metal on flesh, and I'm happy to say nobody has been hurt since. I see barbers haven't completely given up on doing surgery as a side gig. Ob surgeons for sure. Barber here. I had a client who came in that I hadn't seen in about 2 years. He was an older gentleman that used to come in once every couple months, but he just stopped after his wife passed away. Anyways, I guess his family put him in a home after she died, and they did haircuts or something in there. I don't know, I didn't have enough time to figure it out. But his caretakers brought him in for some reason, dropped him off, and said they'd be back in a couple hours. Personally, I thought it was a peenish thing to do, but I always liked Gary, and it was cool to see him again. He smelled terrible, though, and all the color in his eyes was gone. His skin seemed really, I don't know, crispy? You could almost hear his skin crackle and pop when he moved his disgusting arms and legs. Gary wasn't even chatty like he used to be, but I figured he was depressed since his wife died, his kids abandoned him, and he smelled like bags of trash from a Chinese restaurant. Whatever. But the whole time he was waiting he was wearing a baseball cap. Pirates or something, I dunno. I don't follow teams. Dude sits down, and he mumbles some crap about his haircut. And I'm all like, Gary, it's going to be alright, no big deal. Let's get this hat off, and I'll give you a trim on the house. Let's get you good. When I took Gary's cap off there was a lot of resistance, I guess. The cap didn't come off easily is what I'm trying to say. I had to actually use both my hands to get that sucker off. So I lift the cap off with both my hands, and I'm gripping the bill so tightly I hear a small pop. Dude had the cap on tight, right? Even weirder, some bits of Gary's hair came up with the hat. It's starting to fall out now, big guy? I asked. Gary mumbled a response. I put his hat down on the counter and went to work, or would have, because that's when I noticed that Gary had a huge rash on his head where his hair should have been. And even worse, the rash was moving. It was wiggling, even. I was scared as crap and leaned in. Oh no. I went back to his hat and saw that some of Gary's hair in the hat was moving as well. A little bit of vomit came up from my stomach, and I told him we would have to do the haircut another day. The caretakers told me that they didn't know how long Gary had maggots in his head, but he only lived for a couple more months. Alright, WTF, I was not ready. I was ready for everything from Loch Ness Monster to Hell in a Cell, but nothing prepared me for maggot top. Not me, but my mom, who is a hairdresser. Did you know that some hair dye chemicals don't play well together? Turns out the lady had used some sort of home hair dye chemical that basically has tiny bits of metal in it. She didn't mention. My mom goes to dye her hair and puts the professional dye on it, and the hair more or less starts melting as the dye reacts. Her hair was totally ruined. There was no saving it. Only thing to do was to just get the new dye off as fast as possible. She was pretty understanding about the whole situation though. Also a stylist, but this reminds me of a story from one of my instructors. Lady comes into the school and wants highlights, I think. Or it might have been a color remover actually, now that I'm really thinking of it. Box color black, wants to be lighter, is the short of it I suppose. Now this particular instructor has been teaching for like 20 plus years, and she insists on doing a strand test. They take a bit of hair, put the color remover on it in a foil, and it starts smoking. Like immediately. They open the foil and the hair is white in like a minute, but also fried beyond repair. Chemical reactions are wild. Jesus. Imagine getting a stylist that wasn't as thorough with correct procedure and your whole head just starts smoking and you're suddenly bald. This is exactly why I'm so honest with my stylist. This is the nightmare I'm afraid of. I'm not a licensed barber or professional by any means, but I have been cutting my own hair for about 10 years. I'm really good at it, save a lot of time and money, know exactly how to do it, and never have to worry about getting something I don't like anymore. But it has taken a lot of trial and error over the years, especially when I was learning how to fade. This was 3 years ago. I start cutting like I normally do and start fading my sides. At the top on my head the guard pops off, huge freaking chunk falls down my face. So me, still learning, not knowing how to fix it, decides it's best to just buzz it, which I've really only had to do 3 times in my career. I look dumb as crap with a buzzed head, so for some unknown reason, I also decide to shave my beard, thinking maybe it'll equal it all out. Nope. Apologies if this offends anyone, but I look like I'm receiving chemo at this point. Bro, I look like a thumb. Big toe looking ass. So I hated myself. My wife still makes fun of me to this day. I got endless crap from my family and was attached to a hat for like 2 months. This was the moment that made me never mess up again. Thumb thump from Spy Kids looking ass. Don't worry, a lot of us have gone too far and accidentally ended up looking like a potato. I'm dying. Literally the most accurate description. Oh geez. I've been barbering for 7 years and I've got a couple stories. Mostly communication errors. I had a client come in with a super tight haircut, looked like it had just been cut, and asked for a 0 on the sides. I'm not sure what this guy was on, but a 0 is bald to me. So I start my bold line for my fade, and he freaks out that it's way too short, and I ruined his haircut. Since this never happens to me, I got super upset and felt absolutely terrible. I've had clients who text me and ask for an appointment and then I forget to book it. Then they show up and I'm busy and they don't have an appointment. I always calm them because I feel terrible. I used to work in a low-income neighborhood and worked at a black barber shop. I was cutting a kid's hair and since it was so curly you couldn't see his scalp or anything. Started cutting into it and sure enough, he had ringworm. I have hella stories, but those are just the ones that come to mind. 0 is bald. What did the guy think he was asking for? I used to get a full bus, and I used to ask for an 8 on top, longest, and 4 on the sides. I remember one time, I was at Supercuts, and asked for that, and they turned to another cutter, and asked which garden number 8 was, and they said 000, I think. It was a long time ago. It was expressed in zeros, though. I got the right cut. There must be a couple different systems for measuring guards. Since I upped my hair game, I don't ask for a guard anymore. I just say, scissor cut on top to a little more than an inch. Just a little longer in the front than in the back. Thin a little on top, and bus fade the sides down to the length of my sideburns. I trim my beard before I get my haircut. It's better to describe what you're looking for than it is to ask for something as specific as a guard length, to prevent confusion. Not the barber in this story. My younger sister was. This story happened about 38 years ago, so I'm recalling as best as I can remember. Among our friends group was a very sweet young man who we called Bubba. A little heavy and not the sharpest tool in the shed, but a sweet, good-hearted guy. Bubba's hair hung in his face, which drove Sissy nuts. We should note that he had a huge crush on Sissy. One evening we were sitting around my parents' dining room table playing spades. That's a card game. As always, Bubba's hair was hanging over his eyes. Sissy was practically twitching watching him brushing it away every 30 seconds. Finally, she spoke up and said, "Bubba, you need a haircut. Let me just trim your bangs." Of course he immediately agreed. Scissors and a towel were quickly tracked down, and Sissy started clipping. It was uneven and kinda patchy. "This isn't going well." One of Genius' friends spoke up and said, "It ain't even. But I got an idea. Don't trim anymore for a minute. Dude pulls my mom's biscuit mixing bowl out of the cupboard and plonks it on poor Bubba's head. There. Just cut straight across. And she did. Then cut straight across the back. The oh crap moment happened when Sissy took the bowl off Bubba's head and we realized she had given poor Bubba a literal bowl cut. He looked like the Dutch boy Pain Kid's pothead cousin. Lol. Our post reminded me of my youth. My mom gave me literal bowl cuts when I was a kid. I looked horrible. Dutch boy explains it perfectly. When I turned 14, she messed up my bangs. They were so short and a bit uneven. I told her that was the last time she was touching my hair. She never touched it again. When my child was born, I said to my wife, are you going to cut his hair or is he going to have friends?